Okay. I think we did get that all set. I apologize. I had a massive, basically blow up of my computer. Everything got completely messed up and it wasn't working, but it is working now. Um, I do have Ben McAdams coming on in a few minutes to talk about these election results, and hopefully that will work out. But I apologize. I was just trying to get some catastrophic stuff, catastrophic problems fixed as we are waiting for Ben McAdams to come on and join us. Trying to work one other thing here. Just doing some live producing as we're getting everything together. So hopefully that will work. But we are expecting Ben McAdams to come on. I apologize, everyone. We did get some stuff fixed. Yeah, it was just some audio stuff. My audio equipment doesn't play well with Streamlabs, so I just had to jump over to Riverside, and that's probably the best thing to do. So that's what I'm working on. Waiting for Ben McAdams to come on and join us, and we will have that conversation. Hopefully, he'll be able to come in and join us in the studio. But we're live on multiple platforms this evening. I apologize for the technical issues. We got a lot to talk about with these election results from last night. We were online for probably, 3.5 hours last night, and it was great. And let's talk about what happened because we've had a few updates. It does look like Brady Brammer is going to hang on in his primary election. Which is surprising given that he was ahead by about 1,000 votes last night. He increased his lead to almost 2,000 votes. So anyway, I'm a little bit flustered, but I think we got everything fixed. I just had to go through and change everything on my streaming platform simply because my computer decided that it did not want to be around anymore. So we are now waiting to have Ben McAdams join us here on the show, and hopefully he will be able to um, uh, be part of the program. But I want to hear from you. I want to get your thoughts this evening on what happened in last night's. Hang on, just looking here. Waiting what happened on last night's election. But with let's just get straight to this. We're going to bring him on the program. Joining me now on the show is Ben McAdams. He is the Democratic nominee in Utah's first congressional district. He won yesterday's Democratic primary in convincing fashion, a much bigger margin than I thought it was going to be. Ben, you actually won with a full majority. You got 56% of the vote, according to the latest results. I thought it would be probably in the upper 40s, but to actually cross the majority threshold is a pretty big achievement. Ben, welcome into the show tonight, and give us your thoughts on last night's win. How are you feeling after that? You've had a day to digest that.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me on. I love
Can't
your
hear Ben.
live streams and
I
every.
don't know why I
Oh,
can't hear him here. Oh, I know why I
okay.
can't hear him. Hang on. No.
Can
It's
you
me.
hear me
It's
now?
me.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you. Yeah, we felt really good about it. This is how campaigns work. We worked hard. We had dozens of volunteers out, even on election day, just talking to voters. So at the end of the day, campaigning means connecting directly with voters. You can only do so much on social media. At the end of the day, you got to get out there, knock on doors, host events, get out there at festivals, and just talk to voters. And so we were doing that. The night before election, I was out knocking doors until 9 p.m. We had volunteers all day on election day. Out there talking to voters, and we were feeling pretty good then. The vibe, when I was knocking doors in Murray on the night before the election, and the vibe was just really good. People were responding well to the message. They had, it was clear that we had done the work, built the foundation, and it was just a matter of bringing it home.
One of the things that really struck me last night is there was a backlash from voters, mostly be over the data center. We saw Stuart Adams lose his position, and I think the big reason of that is he became the face of the Stratos data center. We saw the two Box Elder County commissioners who voted to approve that. They also have lost their reelection bids. This was an issue in your campaign a little bit, but it didn't seem to have as much traction as it did in those races. Do you think that that's because it wasn't exactly the same issue? You came under fire for having some financial interests in some data center projects, but it wasn't actually, tied to this whole Strato center.
Yeah, look, I think voters are smart. They're smarter than a lot of times politicians give them credit for. They don't like backroom deals. And what happened in Box Elder was very clearly a backroom deal, that was trying to ram something through, telling the voters that the people that they had no business even caring about that. It stunk, right? And I was very clear. I opposed what happened in Box Elder. That data center was wrong on every account, starting with the process, but also with the fossil fuels that they were using, the pollution, the water, all of those things. It was just a bad deal. And I told voters my project was very different. A couple of years ago, my firm was retained by a project in southern Utah, not in the Great Salt Lake watershed, and they wanted to be a good actor. They said, "We know that if we're doing this, we want to do it responsibly. We need to have clean energy." And so my firm does some clean energy advising, and so we had worked with this data center to help them develop a clean energy plan. That data center, first of all, is not in the Great Salt Lake watershed. It is a zero water use facility, and they're using renewable energy. And I think the other thing that's important about that project is they spent 6 years going through the public process and going through the front door and very transparent about it. So, that I think voters are smart enough to recognize the difference. That they know a bad deal when they see it. And look, data centers it is the technology infrastructure of the future. If I could stop it, I think we all would. But the fact of the matter is, this is the technology infrastructure of the future. Let's make sure that we're stopping the bad actors and we're creating pathways for the good ones to do it the right way.
You've been in politics. You've been up on the legislature. You were elected Salt Lake County mayor. When you see a, a politician like Stuart Adams, one of the most powerful people in the state, lose his reelection bid, does that put people your colleagues on notice? Do you think that the other Republicans are going to see that and sort of start treading lightly as they are now going on the ballot in November, now that we're past the primary?
Democracy works best if every politician has to fear for their reelection and work hard to earn it. And that's one of the things about being a Democrat in Utah. You can never take an election for granted. You have to earn it. You have to get out there and talk to voters. You have to listen. But I think our Utah GOP has just gotten fat and lazy. That they have, through gerrymandering, and they've really rigged the system so they are completely unaccountable to the voters. And what they're seeing now, the voters are waking up and they're realizing that they are not serving their interest. And so this was a very clear signal that if you don't listen to us, if you don't respond to what we want, we will find ways to hold you accountable. And they held their elected officials accountable at the ballot box. These were Republicans voting out Republicans. And like I said, that's what's healthy for democracy, is that every politician, myself included, should know that you can't insulate yourself from power by rigging the elections and drawing the boundaries. That you have to work for it. You have to get out there and talk to the voters and listen to them and keep your finger on the pulse. And that's what I've always had to do.
When you were out on the campaign trail, and this is the last thing I'm going to ask about last night's results, and we can start to look forward to November. But when you're out on the campaign trail, I spoke with a lot of other candidates during this cycle, and they said that one of the things that really struck them is voters are angry. They're angry about the way things are happening. I think we did see this with the Stratos data center. I think one of the things that really hurt Stuart Adams in that is the way that the process went down, more so than the actual issue. The fact that it was just rushed through and done behind closed doors. Is voter anger something that you encountered when you were out on the campaign trail and talking with people trying to convince them to cast a ballot
Yeah.
for
Oh,
you?
voter Yeah, voters are really upset and they have every right to be. They're waking up to the fact that the system is rigged, that rich and powerful people are running up the tab for their own benefit and then walking away and leaving the rest of us to pick up the bill. And it's disgusting and they're waking up to it. They're super angry and they have every right to be angry. They want a system that works for them and they know that it doesn't. They're working two jobs and a side hustle and they're still running up credit card debt and falling behind. And so of course voters are angry. I'll tell you something that was different maybe in my race, though. Early on, Brian, we had an interview. I know you interviewed all of the candidates at the time, and you asked, if I was going to participate in the convention process. I had the signatures. I could have just ignored that process, and I decided, this is what elections are about. It's the refiner's fire. You go in, and that process of talking to voters and listening to voters is important. And for that reason, I was committed to going through the convention process. And you see kind of the front running candidate like myself, where you see, Governor Cox has lost a convention, Blake Moore lost a convention. And, what we did through that convention process is we invited delegates. They came to my home. We probably had 300 to 400 delegates coming into my home, 15, 20 people at a time. And we would sit and talk for 2 or 3 hours about the issues. And the one thing I think that can dispel anger is knowing that they have a direct pipeline to the person who wants to represent them. And that process, I would chalk up that process of me actually engaging with the voters and listening to them, talking to them, hearing their concerns, telling them my ideas. That is why, I got 49% of the convention. Liban Mohammed and myself both came through convention under the rules. If we didn't have the signature path, there would have been two candidates in this primary, and I would have been one of them. And I think it's because we did the hard work of talking to voters, and that paid dividends not only at convention and with the success that I saw at convention, but then going out on the campaign trail. Because I had already been listening to voters and was attuned to what they were concerned about and was able to take that onto their doorsteps and really, I think, have a message that resonated.
Looking forward as we go towards November, you're going to be facing Republican Riley Owen in that election. What do you think are some of the issues that are really going to take hold in this campaign? I know that affordability is going to be a big one, and President Trump today said that he was not going to sign this major housing bill, which would have helped a lot of Republicans in swing states, in swing seats, who are getting hit on this affordability issue. Would have helped them on the campaign. And I've heard that a lot of them behind the scenes are seething about that. I'm guessing that affordability is going to be a big thing that you want to talk about. But what are some of the other issues that you're hoping to hit on as this campaign really gets going?
Yeah, well, first going to the housing issue that President Trump is, the American people don't like to be a hostage in a hostage crisis. They don't want, they see what Donald Trump's trying to do. He's trying to pass the SAVE Act or whatever it's called that will give them more tools to mess with our elections. And they're using, he's using affordability not as hey, we're going to come in and solve it, but he's using it as a tool to, in a hostage crisis to try and leverage Republican senators. And it's wrong. The American people don't want to be a hostage in a hostage crisis. So affordability is going to be atop of the agenda. That is why people are mad, because they are working harder than ever and they still can't afford the rent, can't afford to put food on the table. And they just look, hard work should mean stability and prosperity and the ability to live a comfortable life. And that's not the case. So absolutely, we're going to talk about that. I'm going to be talking about, holding Donald Trump accountable. He is, dismantling our democracy, and we need Congress to be a separate branch of government that will be a check on his power and get back to the way that the Constitution intended it. That this isn't Republican Democrat. This is legislative branch and executive branch, and there needs to be a healthy interplay between these branches of government. So, being a check on his power. Immigration reform is something that's been a front burner issue here. We're going to be talking about that and providing, now that the detention center seems to be gone away for now, but we still have a broken immigration system that Donald Trump has abused. So fixing that. The Great Salt Lake is something that I think needs somebody with my background as a problem solver, somebody who charges straight at some of our most difficult issues and tries to solve them and get solutions done in some of the most difficult environments, that's what it's going to take to get more water into the Great Salt Lake, to save the lake. This is about the air we breathe. It's the place we call home. So looking at the Great Salt Lake, and then I think more broadly, just protecting our public lands. What are we going to do to make sure that people have an affordable place to recreate, to get out with your family and camp and hike and mountain bike? And I grew up on these lands, and protecting them to make sure that we can continue to use them for future generations is something that's important to me. I met Riley Owen earlier in this campaign. I think he's an impressive candidate. This district is not a slam dunk for anybody. It's a mistake to think that just because I won the Democratic nomination, I'm going to waltz into this in November. The district, as you've pointed out, Brian, is 25% registered Democrat. It's 35% registered Republican, and the rest are independent and unaffiliated voters. Nobody's going to win this election unless they can build a coalition that crosses party lines that's bigger than any individual party. I think that's healthy for democracy, because anybody who wants to win this election is going to have to listen to the voters, take their case directly to them, and earn their trust.
Well, Ben McAdams, I appreciate your flexibility. We had some technical issues, but I appreciate you jumping on this evening. And we put it this way: I appreciate having you on board, and we look forward to talking to you as the campaign goes on. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Brian.
your time.
Thank you.
Okay, that's Ben McAdams, the nominee. He is the nominee in Utah's first congressional district. And now we're back to the show. So I appreciate everyone having a little bit of flexibility. We had some technical issues, but we are on board. Hopefully, we will get Stephanie Hollis to join us. I sent her a link to join us this evening. Hopefully, she'll get back on board with us. But I got everything ironed out, and now we are able to talk about last night's results. So, again, thank you for everybody's flexibility, as I had to completely switch over to a brand new platform to make this work this evening. Anyway, I want to know what you're thinking about the election results now that you've had about 24 hours to marinate on them. I have had 24 hours to marinate on them, and I've got some thoughts going forward, but I want to hear what you think now that you've had a chance to sit with all of this. As we know, Stuart Adams has been defeated. He knocked out. He is the first sitting Senate president to lose since Steve Polton was defeated by Patrice Arent, a Democrat, in 2002. It's been a long time since you've had a sitting Senate president lose their reelection bid. So that's significant in and of itself. But I have some thoughts about probably why he lost. A lot of it, I think, is the Stratos data center, but maybe not for the reason that you think. We've had a couple of updates, as I said, coming into the show tonight. It looks like Senator Brady Brammer in Senate District 21 will hang on. A very tough challenge for him, but it does look like he is going to hang on to that seat. We did have an update on those results, and he increased his lead over Kelly Smith. Those came out just after 5 o'clock this evening. In fact, I'll bring up the results here. Let me do that real fast. Right here, so everyone can take a look at those. But as we can see them, where is that? Okay, that's the regular state one. We come over here. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate this with the new system and make sure that work. Let's go over here to Utah County, because that's where we will see it. So in the Utah County election results, as you can see right here, Republican for Senate District 21, Brady Brammer has increased his lead over Kelly Smith by about 2,000 votes right now. So it looks like he's going to hang on to that seat and fend off that challenge from Kelly Smith. But as we look ahead, I'm suspecting that a lot of the Republicans up in the legislature are pretty freaked out about what happened last night. Stuart Adams just does not lose an election like that, all of a sudden. I'm expecting people are going to start treading very lightly as they look forward towards their reelection bids in November. But there's also a lot of relief. Like I said, it only took a matter of hours before people in the close to the Republicans in the Senate started calling me to talk about what happened, to just dish. I can't really say who it was, but the sense of those conversations that I got is there is some relief that Stuart Adams is gone. He was not well liked among his fellow Republicans in the Senate because he ran that caucus pretty much like with an iron fist. He ran that caucus with an iron fist. He bullied everybody to get what he wanted, and he was powerful enough, had a lot of financial resources that what he wanted he got, and everybody else had to pretty much bow to his whim. But now that he's gone, all of that power is gone as well, and so now people are willing to talk about Stuart Adams. Like I said in last night's live stream, somebody said to me, we were having this conversation a number of months ago and talking about how voters were upset, voters were angry, and why the legislature wasn't more responsive to the concerns of the voters that they were hearing. And this person told me that until people in the legislature, both the House and the Senate, but people in the legislature are more scared of their voters than they are of Stuart Adams, things are not going to change. Well, I think people are now a little more scared of their voters heading into November. And generally, that's kind of a good thing. So, yeah. But I think one of the reasons why Stuart Adams lost, I think one of the main reasons he lost, the biggest reason is the Stratos data center. And I think people are concerned about the impact that data center is going to have on the quality of life here in Utah. I think people are upset about the water use, the size of the project. But I was having a conversation with someone today, and they said, yeah, those are all factors. But when it boils down to it, the biggest thing that really hurt Adams was the process where they rushed this thing through and did it away from public view. But that's, Adams has thought he was so untouchable that he didn't he was able to do whatever he wanted, and he thought that he was going to be able to do this because he thought it was a good idea. It was economic development, and he was on board with this. But I think the process is one of the things that really hurt him more than anything. I'll be fascinated to see if the remaining members of the Senate moderate how they approach their elections as we get closer to November. One other update, it does look like Susan Lee, Trevor Lee's mom, we know that the Representative Trevor Lee lost last night, lost his reelection bid. It does look like Susan Lee is at least on track to becoming the Republican nominee in Davis County. Because according to an update, she was behind slightly heading into this morning after the last results released last night. But then we got an update today, and it does look like Susan Lee is now heading, at least in the lead. That flips. She now has just under 51% of the vote. She is leading Lorene Kamaluv by maybe 600 votes or something like that. So a very, very close election. But it does look like Susan Lee does have the inside track. That's Trevor Lee's mother. To become the Republican nominee in the Davis County Commissioner District B. So I wrote a story today, basically going down the winners and the losers for all of the elections. And we talked about Stuart Adams, MIDA, the MIDA process that approved the Stratos data center, blew up in his face spectacularly. And he didn't know how to minimize the damage. And part of the problem is Stuart Adams is a perfect product of the caucus and convention system. Adams, when he was first elected to the House, was elected in a special election that was voted on by delegates. There was an opening in the House, and he won that seat. He won a re-election, didn't have to face a primary, and then decided not to run again. And then when Greg Bell became the lieutenant governor, after John Huntsman went to Washington to become the the ambassador to China under the Obama administration, and Gary Herbert became the governor. He needed a lieutenant governor. He tapped Greg Bell out of the Senate, and Stuart Adams won the delegate vote there to move into the Senate. And this is the first ever time he had to rely on getting elected by a wider universe of voters. This is one of those seats that is so solidly Republican that you win the Republican nomination and you win in November, or you have it's almost a done deal that you win in November. And this is the first time that he has had to make his reelection bid to people other than the delegates, a wider universe of Republican voters. First time ever. His campaign was not built for that. His campaign was terrible. Everybody I talked to said that it was one of the worst campaigns that they've seen. All of the awful, um, all of the awful AI generated stuff, all of that. It was just horrid. And Adams' campaign was not built for this. He wasn't built for this as a candidate. He's used to having to win with a limited number of delegates. He's used to having to win with just a small number of delegates, win a majority there, win the 60% of delegates, and then win the nomination. And he didn't have to appeal to a larger group. And this is the first time that he's had to try to appeal to thousands of voters. Because if you look at what happened at the state convention this year, he got, you know how many people voted in the third and final round of his election? There were 4 Republicans in the election to start off: him, Stephanie Hollis, Braden Hess, and Jennifer Garner. They had to go through 4 rounds. And in the 4th round, Adams got 54.8%, which was 85 votes. That's it. 100 and what? And Heads got 70. So that's 155 votes total of the delegates. That was the universe of voters that he was working with heading, in every election in the past. Not anymore, because when he in yesterday's election, you pull up these numbers. I'm going to pull them up here. But in yesterday's election, there were over 21,000 votes cast. So 155 votes versus 21,000 votes. Those are 2 completely different animals. And his campaign and him as a candidate were not built for that. We're not built for that. So he was behind the 8 ball immediately. That's why, when I first saw that he was likely going to be pushed into a primary, I warned y'all. I said this was going to be tough for him. And it was. And it was. So anyway, we could talk a little bit about that. Also, the 2 Box Elder County commissioners who voted in favor of the Stratos data center, they also lost. So this is a very toxic issue. And I wonder if people are going to be able to tie other candidates to this going forward. So we can discuss that. Let's take a look and see what some of the people are saying in the chat. Emma Jolo on YouTube says, I'm disappointed that Nate Bluin didn't do better. I didn't think he was going to win, but having it be close would send a message to McAdams to lean left. The problem is that, and you heard Ben say it, this is not a left-leaning congressional district. Yes, it's going to vote Democratic. Yes, it's likely to elect a Democrat, but it's not like one of these blue strongholds that you see in other states. Democrats make up 25% of the electorate. The rest are independents and Republicans. So he's going to have to find a way to put together a coalition among those voters as well. So yes, I'm sure that he's going to um, be a little further to the left than he was the last time he was in Congress. And that would make sense because the last time he was in Congress, he was in a majority Republican district, a very red district. And he had to vote accordingly. But as he said, he knew that his vote to impeach Donald Trump was probably going to cost him his seat in Congress. Let's take a look here. JK771 on YouTube says, let me see if I can do this. Oh, I can bring that up on the stream. What do you think Adams will do with all of his PAC's money now? Does he seem like the kind of politician who needs to be in an office, or will he retire and fund the people he wants from the sidelines? Well, he can't keep that money. There's a lot that he can do with it, but he can't just write a check to himself. And if you look at what he's used his money for in the past, this is the first time he's really had to spend big on a campaign. In the past, Adams has, he spends his PAC money and his campaign money on travel. He travels around. He still was doing a little bit of that, but and he would fund some candidates, but he wouldn't give much political support. When he realized he was going to get a primary challenge earlier this year, it was pretty clear, or when it looked like he was going to get a primary challenge earlier this year, he donated the largest amount of money from his PAC to another candidate. And it was himself. It was the first time his PAC donated that much money. It was like $45,000, $50,000 to himself. So this is the first time he's really had to use his campaign money on campaigns. First time he's had to use his PAC money on campaigns. For the most part, I mean, he spent what was it? He added over $110,000 his PAC spent on advertising, which was an in-kind donation to his campaign. So I have to see how that works out. Take a drink. I wrote this today, and I do have to credit Nathan Detroit because he made the joke last night on the live stream. But one of the people who is probably very happy today is Tina Cannon, because she's been fighting with Stuart Adams for 2 years, who's been trying to evict her from her offices so they could build these neat new offices, or these fancy new offices for the Republican senators, not the Democratic senators, but the Republican senators, so they don't have to go to the other building. She's still going to have to move. They moved her down to the first floor in the Capitol, which is essentially the basement. It's not the basement. That's where the press room is, but down to the first floor. They're moving her offices down there, but she can take a little bit of solace in the fact that Adams will not be in office when those new offices open up. So he will not be able to take advantage of that because he lost his position last night. The Utah Republican Party, we also talked a little bit about this last night. They sent out those scaremongering texts last night, or the night before the election, attacking Stephanie Hollis, trying to boost Stuart Adams. That was one of the weirdest things that I've seen in a long time. And, it was clear that happened because Adams was panicking. He was freaking out about his reelection bid. And so that's why they decided to do that. But, now what is that relationship going to be like between Stephanie Hollis and the Utah Republican Party? The Mad Bluebird on Instagram asked an interesting question. Yesterday, you mentioned that Prop 4 could potentially be applied to state districts as well. Is that explicit or implicit in the text? Would it require another 8 years of lawsuits? No. Prop 4 covers congressional districts, the House, the Senate, and state school board. The lawsuit challenging the legislature's repeal of Prop 4 was only over the congressional maps. The judge did not have the discretion to rope in the House and the Senate. I suppose if somebody wanted to file another lawsuit, and had the money to do so, they could probably force the drawing of new legislative maps before the 2028 election. A lot of these issues have already been litigated, depending on what the legislature does with the proposed constitutional amendment that they're talking about to, give them the power to overturn and repeal any of these citizen backed initiatives, which is what they got in trouble for in the first place. That's why the Utah Supreme Court ruled the way that they did, and that's why they decided to pack the court, because they were upset that the Utah Supreme Court slapped them down on that. So it's possible, if somebody wanted to sue, if Prop 4 does stand in its current form, when they draw new districts in 2031, they're going to have to follow the rules of Prop 4, and that means they can't use partisan data, and they can't consider where incumbents live, and they can't split up communities. And so instead of, Republicans and incumbents drawing themselves safe seats, it's going to be completely up to this independent commission. So that's what would happen with Prop 4. So yeah, it works for all of the it works for all parts of the redistricting process. It's not just the congressional districts. The thing is that the lawsuit was just over the congressional districts and not anything else. If you go on some of the very conservative Republican Facebook pages today, as I tend to do, noticed that they're pretty mad that the signature gathering path still exists, and that there are at least 5-6 big races where the winner in yesterday's primary vote would have been eliminated at convention. Stephanie Hollis would have been eliminated at convention if she had not gathered signatures. Blake Moore would have been eliminated at convention, and you would be looking at Congresswoman Carrie Ann Lisenby, most likely in November, but Blake Moore was able to gather signatures. In Senate District 13, that's the race to replace Nate Bluen, Democrat Sylvia Catton. She lost a convention, but she was able to gather signatures, survive to the primary, and then win the nomination. HD 29, Republican Sheldon Birch. That is the race to replace Bridger Bolander. He would have been eliminated at convention, but he gathered signatures and ended up defeating Alexis Wheeler, who was the convention winner. HD 38, that's to replace Cheryl Acton. Chris McConaughey, the Republican, he would have lost handily at convention to Gloria Vindis. Gloria Vindis was essentially Cheryl Acton's handpicked replacement there, but he was able to get signatures, survive to the primary, and then win. We also saw that in State School Board 11, Republican Tracy Nuttall would have lost a convention, but ended up getting signatures and surviving to the primary, which is the reason why SB 54 was put in place in the first place. Because they saw what happened to Bob Bennett in 2012. Bob Bennett did not see the threat coming his way, and he was eliminated at the Republican convention by Tim Bridgewater and Mike Lee. Mike Lee actually finished second in that convention, but was able to advance to the primary. And that's why we have the signature path. And Republicans, they want to get rid of it because you have people, people who don't have to listen to them, people who don't have to listen to them winning these Republican nominations, and they're quite mad about it. Now, on the other hand, there were a number of convention-only candidates who ended up winning the primary, winning at convention, but then faced a signature gathering opponent and were able to win the nomination. In SD 18, Doug Fiafia, who ousted Dan McCabe, everybody in that race was convention only. Brady Brammer, convention only, looks like he's going to hang on. HD 14 Republican John Taylor, convention only. He's going to probably hang on there. Jordan Tusher, we don't have an update from Salt Lake County today. That one is still a very close race, probably within 250 votes. I've heard there's several thousand votes still outstanding to be counted in Salt Lake County. We don't know where they are, so it'd be hard to make any assumptions as as to what that might do for this race. But when you're still within 250 votes, that's still a very, very tight race. But Jordan Tusher was convention only. J.R. Bird in HD 667, convention only. He ends up advancing. And in HD 69, Logan Monson. There were a few others who won at convention, but they had filed to collect signatures initially. Let's see. I know there's a bunch of people who have been weighing in on TikTok, so let me look at this. Kiki and the Cats on TikTok asks, is Cullimore going to be the new Senate president? You know what? I don't know. Rushforth for Utah replied and said he's the majority leader in the Senate, which means he's a likely successor, but not so fast. Because if you look at it, there's a base of support. The backstory is you had the leadership team 2 years ago, before the 2024 election, with Stuart Adams as president, Evan Vickers as majority leader. You had Don Ipson as, I believe he was the majority whip, and Ann Milner was the assistant majority whip. That was the leadership team. And then those three got ousted because they got crossways with Adams. And there's a lot of people in that caucus who are not fans of McAdams, or excuse me, of Adams. They're probably not fans of McAdams either because he's a Democrat. But there's a lot of people in that caucus who are not fans of Adams and are happy that he's gone. So you're probably going to see different factions come into play. Plus, you're going to have a bunch of brand new senators. So it's not certain that Cullimore is going to be the Senate president. I'm sure he wants to run, but I wouldn't be surprised if Evan Vickers decides to run. I wouldn't be surprised if you see other people get involved in that race. You know, I'd love to see Todd Weiler get that. I've always Todd Weiler. I mean, he's a bit of a troll, and I don't know if he would want the job, but I've always enjoyed the way that he has operated up on the Hill. I think it'd be interesting to see him in a leadership position. I have no idea if he would do that. Kiki and the Cats asked if I will ask Hollis about the lawsuit regarding your press pass. I was hoping to have her on, but we had a big technical issue earlier this evening, and I had to switch over, and so I don't know if she's going to be able to join us or not. If not, I will have her on a future podcast. But my computer just did not like something at all, and it froze up, and I had to restart and everything. So I apologize for that. So I don't know if we're going to have her on tonight. I have been trying to communicate with her, but I don't know if that is going to work out or not. I'm assuming it's probably not going to happen this evening, and I apologize for that. But again, all the technical problems. Sometimes you just have to deal with that. Kiki and the Cat says, I'd ask for a recount in the Davis County Commissioner race if I were Kamalu. I think they may have to have one. I think if it's within 1%, I'll have to look up the actual numbers. I was going to do that, but then my computer decided to blow up. So I'm not sure if that's going to, I'm not sure what the recount numbers are, but we'll have to watch that. But if Susan Lee is the nominee in that Davis County Commissioner seat, she is going to be facing an independent candidate. Name is escaping me. He just jumped into that race, and he's a former county commissioner. Brent Milburn is the independent candidate, the unaffiliated candidate. It's hard for unaffiliated candidates to win those races, but maybe because as we've seen. At least with Trevor Lee, the Lee name was toxic up there. I don't know if his mother is going to suffer the same problem. The people I talked to up there said there really wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for her candidacy. Anyway, what else can we talk about this evening? Because there was a lot. I mean, a lot of stuff to chew about. I'm still just in shock that Stuart Adams ended up losing. Utah Grit says on Instagram, and I agree with this: when a legislative supermajority stops listening to the people, a ballot initiative becomes one of the few ways citizens can make their voices heard. And that's why they've made it so hard to put ballot initiatives on the ballot. And they made some changes this year. One of the things, it's a constitutional amendment that everybody's going to get a chance to vote on, that says if there is, if the constitutional, if the ballot initiative has a tax increase in it, you won't need 50% plus one to pass it. It needs to pass with a 60% majority. And the way that it's written, it's so vague that anything can be construed as a tax increase. They've already changed the process where you have to, if it raises taxes, you have to the new law that was just passed said that if it raises taxes or if it's going to cost money, you have to show in the budget where you're going to cut to pay for it, which really just makes the process incredibly onerous on people who want to try to run that. The legislature was not happy that 3 ballot initiatives passed in 2018. Prop 4, the anti-gerrymandering, there was a medical cannabis, and there was the Medicaid expansion. And they changed all of them. The only one that got challenged in court was Prop 4. That's one of the ways that the people can make their voices heard, and that's why the legislature has tried to change that. They try to do that as much as possible. I mean, they're trying to limit it as much. They're trying to limit the opportunity for the public at large, because they don't spend as much time considering these. They don't spend as much time considering these bills as they do up in the legislature in the 30 some odd days they're up on the Hill. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about Phil Lyman. Um, I did write an analysis piece earlier this week that laid out a path that Phil Lyman could win, could defeat Celeste Malloy. He needed to overperform. He needed to activate his base of voters along the eastern side of the state and around San Juan County and the Canyonlands and that. And who boy, he did not. Oh boy, he did not do that. Phil Lyman got beat like a drum. Celeste Malloy defeated him in every county except for San Juan County. And her margin of victory was 20 points or more in every single county except for Grand County, where she beat Mill Lyman by 18%. And honestly, I probably should have seen that coming, because as I mentioned on a previous live stream, his campaign was not operating like a campaign was supposed to. I don't know if you guys can see it, but my dogs are coming in and trying to tell me some stuff here. I'll try to get one of them on the live stream. Moosey. Moose. Let's see if I can get him. This is Moose. Come here, Moose. Come here. He's wary. He knows I'm going to pick him up. Here, buddy. He doesn't want to do it. Okay. He's looking at me, thinking I might have something for him. Let me try to trick him here. Oh, you want this? Come here. Didn't get him. All right. Enough of that. Trying to have some dog time on that. But that's Moose. Anyway, his campaign was not operating like a campaign was supposed to. Take those out. They're starting to hurt my ears a little bit. And he didn't do the things that a campaign was supposed to. Lo-Fi Mexican on TikTok has it exactly right. Phil Lyman spent this whole year shit posting on Facebook instead of campaigning to get the job. Yeah, exactly. And Facebook campaigns just don't work. You have to go out and do the things, the blocking, the tackling, the nuts, the bolts that you need to actually win. And he didn't do that. And he spent a lot of time A lot of time listening to his very, very enthusiastic supporters. The problem is there's just not enough of him, or they weren't in the right area. Because you remember he lost at the state convention, which really shocked some people. He got a lot of loud cheers at the state convention, but those people couldn't vote for him because they weren't in his district. But Phil Lyman got whooped. And as I pointed out, this is the fourth election that he's lost since 2024. He lost the gubernatorial primary to Spencer Cox. He lost his write-in bid for governor. He lost the election to become the Republican Party chair. And then he lost this one. So what's next? Well, he's already said he's going to run for governor in 2028. But there's absolutely nothing that he can take away from this election that makes him think he can win a run for governor. Nothing. And if you get people like Jason Chaffetz and John Curtis in the race, Phil Lyman he's not going to, he benefited from being in a one-on-one competition against Spencer Cox at the Republican State Convention, and there was a lot of delegate dissatisfaction with Spencer Cox. He's not going to have that next time. It's going to be a multiple candidate race. He's not going to be the only alternative in town, and I just don't know where he goes from here. But he got beat bad. Like, that was a drubbing. That was a really, really bad loss for Spencer or for Phil Lyman. Infinite Narwhal on YouTube asks, will the 3 new additions to the Supreme Court be enough to neuter Prop 4? Depending on if they bring it back up to the Utah Supreme Court. They've already ruled that the legislature overstepped their bounds by when they repealed Prop 4. They ruled that the legislature overstepped their constitutional authority. They weren't allowed to do that. And so that is precedent. That has been decided. There are probably some other constitutional issues, but I think the cleanest thing the legislature could do is try to pass the constitutional amendment that says that they have the power to repeal these citizens' initiatives, which is what the Supreme Court said that they couldn't do. But after what happened last night and Stuart Adams losing, I don't know if they're going to try that. They might, but do they really want to open up another lane for angry voters to come after them? Because they're already mad about the whole process. They're mad about the process with the data center. There is this perception that they don't listen to voters. There's a perception that they're making decisions outside of the view of the voters, which they are doing that. They're doing everything in closed caucuses up on the Hill. They make all their decisions behind closed doors. So do they want to risk upsetting voters more? If they're smart, they'll probably not do that and wait until 2028 because they still have time. They still have time to try to do that. Faith on Instagram says precedent is just vibes these days. True. Exactly. Rushforth says Adams was an essential driving force behind the Prop 4 repeal. Oh yeah, you could tell the way that he would throw a fit when voters did something he didn't like. That was very telling. And I don't know what his future is. I've heard people say that they're going to try and make it so that he is forced off of the MITA board, which would probably be the final indignity for him. The MITA board is his baby. Is so hard up at the legislature to make any changes to MITA because everybody knew MITA is Adam's baby and you don't touch that. But he's not going to be in office anymore. That doesn't preclude him from being on the MITA board, but also Jerry Stevenson, who's not going to be in office anymore. He's still on the MITA board. If they wanted to do something good PR-wise, they would probably ask him to step down. I don't know if he would do that. But I think this is going to lead to a lot of changes in the Senate because Adams has been, I mean, that's been his personal little kingdom for years. And people who benefited from from him being in charge are now suddenly exposed. That he can't he can't protect them going forward. Hopefully, we're going to get some more results tomorrow. We're still waiting for some of the stuff in Salt Lake County. There are some of the races in that county that we are still waiting to see where that is going to end up. There's a couple of races that I think are still fairly close. Most of the stuff is done. But that's one of the ones we're waiting for an update on. Wendy Davis, Andrew Stoddard race. That one's like within 100 and some votes, 98 votes. Maybe there's enough votes still outstanding there. I'll be interested to see if that happens. According to Salt Lake County clerks, if they're going to update, it'll be tomorrow after 5 p.m. Jordan Tusher and Scott Stevenson, that one is still 250 vote margin there with Tusher hanging on. So that one's still tight. We'll have to see how that one works out. So yeah, there's still a few races that are up in the air, but I don't know how much they are going to change going forward. Utah Grad says, which races are still close and can still swing? Those are probably the two big ones. There's one down in Washington County, Victor Iverson. Take a look at that one as I bring up the results here. Down in Washington County, Victor Iverson, the incumbent county commissioner, seat B, he is losing to Troy Belliston by 500 and some votes, under 500 votes, around there. That's sort of the margin there. But with the changes that the legislature made to elections, we're not going to be waiting for several weeks. Like, the votes are in, they're just waiting to count the last few the last few ballots that are outstanding, and there aren't very many of them outstanding. Nathan Detroit on Twitch says, congrats to Mexico. 3 shutout wins in the group stage, easily through to the round of 32. The way it stands right now, let's talk a little World Cup. The way it stands right now, in that round of 32, it looks like they would I'm going to pull up my little app. The BBC did a great thing where they were looking at all the permutations, and I think the way that it was standing, I'll try to look at it really fast here. This is excellent broadcasting etiquette, but the way it stands in the knockout stage, and things could still change, but it looks like Mexico will be playing Scotland on July 1st. And Mexico playing Scotland, I think, could unlock levels of alcohol consumption not previously seen on this planet. The Scots are a party. I was watching a little bit of that match tonight as Brazil just outclassed them. Brazil's so much better than they are. But I was watching a little bit of that last night, and the Scottish fans singing "Flower of Scotland," just the volume. That's why the World Cup is great. We need to have and not for nothing. 1 year from today, the Women's World Cup starts in Brazil. Nathan Detroit says, if all goes well, it will be Mexico, England in the round of 16. Yes, that's what it looks like. And for the most part, it does look like the United States is going to play Bosnia on July 2nd. And if they win that, then they would likely get the winner of Egypt and South Korea. So it's a very favorable bracket for the United States. United States, they play their final game tomorrow against Turkey. I'm going to be at one of the watch parties. I think I'll be heading over to the one at Mill Creek Commons. If you see me, say hello. But I'm planning on probably going over there to watch that tomorrow night. Anything else on your mind this evening? Let's see, comment here. Faith on Instagram says Brammer won for sure. His margin increased by almost 1,000 votes today. He's up by over 1,900 votes right now. I don't think that there's enough vote still unaccounted for to flip that one back to where it was. As I wrote today, I think one of the best things that happened in this is that we're having what looks to be a return to normalcy in Utah County because Aaron Davidson has seemingly lost his bid for another term as the Utah County clerk. And if you look just over the things that have happened with him, do you remember in 2024 when he tried to force everybody to vote in person? Because what he did was instead of putting return postage or paying for the postage for people to send their ballots back in, he didn't do that. So he was trying to force people to vote in person because, he's an election fraud believer, conspiracy theorist. But the problem for Davidson was there are only 9 cities in Utah County that had the in-person voting center, so they didn't have a capacity to handle that for everyone. And so they ran out of paper, they ran out of printer, they ran out of printer toner, and they had to get a plane and fly it down to Arizona to get the stuff that they needed so everybody could finish voting. That's just one of the things that happened during his tenure. If you remember, also in 2024, he was investigated by the Utah County Attorney because he was tracking how elected officials were returning their ballots. He was in an interview and just casually dropped that Mike McKell returned his ballot via mail. And everyone was like, wait, how do you know that? So they had to change the law in 2025 to say you can't access that kind of information. He also issued that open letter following the 2024 election where he said that he basically raised questions about whether Spencer Cox and Deidre Henderson qualified for the ballot, just echoing the ludicrous claims from Phil Lyman and his supporters. And then he called for Deidre Henderson's prosecution. That was all in 2024. And then earlier this year, he hired Kai Schwemmer, who's essentially, for want of a better term, a Nazi, because he wanted to have more outreach for the younger people. He's a live streamer. Because, if there's anything that young people say they want more of, it's Nazi live streamers. And that was how they were going to reach out to more of the youth. So it looks like Aaron Davidson is gone, and his tenure is over with. Corey Astle appears to have a commanding lead on that. Nathan Detroit says he's excited to watch the U.S. second string play tomorrow against Turkey. No way they start everyone. I suspect that they're going to give Pulisic some time. He's missed the last match. He's back to training with the team. I'm sure he'll get out there. I did see that the coach Pochettino said that all 4 of the Americans who are sitting on a yellow card, they will play part of tomorrow's game. But he has the opportunity to start a completely different lineup or give a lot of other players a chance. What was remarkable is that he started the exact same lineup except for Pulisic between game 1 and game 2. And that usually does not happen. Narcoleptic Mom on YouTube says Trump stating he won't sign the Housing Act when it will pass anyway in 10 days minus Sunday. I understand what you're saying because the Constitution says that when Congress passes a bill, when they present it to the president, he has 10 days to sign it or veto it, or it automatically becomes law. But there's a couple of caveats to that. One, Congress has to be in session during those 10 days, and it's possible that Mike Johnson could take them out of session, and that would allow Trump to do his pocket veto where he just sits on the bill and doesn't do anything with it. And 2, I don't think Congress has actually presented him with the bill yet. I may be wrong, but I think that's part of the coverage that I was seeing today. And Trump is holding it hostage because he wants to pass Senator Mike Lee's SAVE Act, which does not have the votes in the Senate to pass. We talked about that a little bit with Ben McAdams when he was on the show earlier. talked about how this is addressing the problem of affordability that a lot of people have said, a lot of voters, this is a big issue for voters. Things are way more expensive right now. People cannot afford housing. So this housing bill that's supposed to help with affordability, and Trump is sitting on it. And the analysis I've seen is there's a lot of Republicans in vulnerable seats in November who are probably very mad that this is their opportunity to go back to their constituents and say, look, we did something. This bill passed with massive bipartisan support. But Trump wants his election crackdown bill, and so he's holding it hostage. We'll have to see how that plays out. The problem is you're depending on Mike Lee to try to shepherd it through, and Mike Lee doesn't have the juice to get this bill passed. He just doesn't. Lo-Fi Mexican says, I'm wary of Corey Astle becoming county clerk. I ran against him for Lehigh City Council a few years ago, and have been watching him run for any office possible since. He finally won one, but I'm glad Davidson is gone. Well, I am, I didn't have a rooting interest in that race, but I was very alarmed when Davidson was elected because I had covered him for a long time beforehand. Vaccine conspiracies. I remember when he was at the Utah County, he showed up at a Utah County Commission meeting, and they were talking about an outbreak of monkeypox, and he said some pretty outrageous things. So, let's see. Sorry, we're looking at an auto moderator. Nathan Detroit did something, and the auto moderator didn't like that. I'll have to see if I can fix that. Probably something on one of my platforms. Narcoleptic Mama says, but it's overwhelmingly supported by both sides. Yes, this housing affordability bill, it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in both chambers. And you're starting to see some cracks. You did see the Senate pass that bill to require Trump to basically end the Iraq war. I was surprised that Mike Lee didn't vote for that because he has been a big war powers guy. I guess you're only a constitutional expert when you want to use it as a weapon against the other side, right? So anyway. Okay, well, again, I apologize for the technical issues we had. I'm going to try to work those out going forward. We're probably just going to have to use this platform and try to figure out a way to make it work for with other with the equipment that I have. It was the platform I was using was causing some big problems on my computer, and I thought it was dead, but I was able to revive it. But I'm glad I got to spend this time with you, talk about those election results. We are expecting some more results to come in tomorrow. Especially from Salt Lake County. We'll probably get the last updates. I don't think there will be much outstanding vote after tomorrow. Maybe something on Friday, but it's going to be very, very. There's just not going to be a lot of them left. Nathan Detroit says, I bet they hold the bill rather than go into recess. Thune certainly isn't going to put the Senate in recess and let Trump appoint his wackos. Well, if the House is out of session, then I guess they both have to be out of session at the same time. And, there's a lot of opposition to some of Trump's nominees, National Intelligence Director or Director of National Intelligence. Remember when Chris Stewart almost got that job? Oh, he wanted it really bad. Like he almost got it during the first Trump administration. He was a finalist. There was reporting in Bloomberg and in the New York Times that Chris Stewart was probably going to get that job. And that was until the very end when someone pointed Trump to Stewart's comments calling him our Mussolini. Somebody shivved Chris Stewart at the end to keep him from getting that that job. But that was a job Chris Stewart wanted very badly. And then a year later, he resigned from Congress. Nick Campbell says, "Do I have any thoughts on John Taylor for HD 14? I really haven't been, I really haven't followed that race closely. I do know that he collected signatures and and won overwhelmingly at the Davis County Convention. So that tells me that he's a favorite of the delegates. Caratoon, his opponent, collected signatures." And he won pretty convincingly. That's the seat to replace Carrie Ann Lisenby. I don't know how close his politics are to Carrie Ann Lisenby, but you can make some assumptions just based on the fact that he was well liked by the delegates, won a big majority of delegates at the convention, and she had to survive through signatures. Okay, well, that's probably going to do it. Again, apologize for the technical issues we had this evening. Want to thank Ben McAdams for coming on the show. If you missed that interview, I'll put it out as a podcast tomorrow. I'll make sure that that gets done. But in the meantime, go over to my website, utahpolitics.news. Sign up for my newsletter if you haven't. I'm working on a story. You remember when the Salt Lake County Republican Party brought in Nick Shirley, the supposed journalist Nick Shirley, when they brought him in to speak at their Lincoln Day dinner? He replaced Carrie Lake, who had to pull out at the last second. You want to know how much they paid him? Well, I'll tell you. I'm going to have that story tomorrow at utahpolitics.news. Also, I'm going to let you know how much the Washington County Republican Party paid Benny Johnson to come in and speak at their Lincoln Day dinner. Those are supposed to be fundraisers, but I can tell you this: Salt Lake County GOP did not raise a lot of money. It cost them a lot of money to hold that event with Nick Shirley. But I'll have that tomorrow. And if you want to hear it, if you want to see it when it comes out, go to my website, utahpolitics.news, sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get that story when I write it tomorrow. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, any comments, you can always message me on any one of these apps. I appreciate your DMs. You can send me an email. If you want to support this show, what I do as an independent journalist, you can become a paying subscriber at utahpolitics.news or throw some money in the tip jar. All of it goes to the production you see here, and it's probably part of the reason why we had the big technical issues this evening, because I'm one guy trying to figure this all out. Anywho, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for your time this evening. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. We'll do this again soon. If something happens, Nathan Detroit asks if they paid Benny Johnson in rubles. That's a great joke. Nathan Detroit always with the good joke. But yeah, I'll have that story for you tomorrow. In the meantime, thank you so much for your time and attention. We will talk to you again soon. Have a great evening, everyone.